Morning. Look, Mum, I found a lady that I like. That's incredible. Don't know how she popped onto my feed. I'll put her video in the description as per usual. So she's talking about a book in this video. Apparently, the book is titled "Everything I Want to Do Is Illegal" by one Joel Salatin, who is apparently a farmer. I know nothing about this individual, and I know nothing about the book. But I have a little anecdote that I want to share after we've heard what I believe her name is Jumi. I do not know how to pronounce it. I do apologize. We're gonna go with Jomi. It's got two O's, but yeah, she's of Korean descent, but she's obviously American. Okay, so let's listen to what she has to say. It's fairly long, really. So this entire beginning is all about this, and then I'm gonna talk about an anecdote, very hypothetically. So off you go, Joey.
The regulations will look different for different farmers because different states or counties have their own regulations, but some of these are on the federal level, so all farmers in the US are affected. But by and large, the regulations almost always disadvantage the small operators because, again, the big operators have enough volume of meat that all these additional costs are spread over. Because not
Okay, so she's talking about raising animals for slaughtering. In this particular case, she's talking about pork. And what she said is very important. She said that regulations are put in place in such a way that they will severely disadvantage small, you can call them companies, I suppose, small groups of farmers. Say, for example, if the local farmer that lives near you, that you can see his or her animals grazing from your window. I live rural, so this type of thing is not that impossible, right? You can't just go to them and go like, "Hey, can you give me one of your animals?" You know, I'll slaughter him and then have meat, and so on. You can't do that. All of that's totally illegal. That applies to everywhere. All of these regulations obviously uh, are put forth with the idea of safety, right? So that you don't get rotten meat or whatever, that sort of stuff. So everything around farming is regulated. Clarkson's farm covers this aplenty. Now, by now, the regulations are so suffocating that it's almost impossible to want to be a farmer. Certainly to want to be a farmer legally. That becomes really, really annoying. And that's what this book is apparently about. And so now she just said basically that these regulations are there to help the large companies essentially, which is really fundamentally what it's about. Because if you need to have facilities in order to, I don't know, sterilize the meat or do this or do that or do this in this certain way or this in the other way and so on and so forth, it becomes completely insane for a small operator to deal with it, right? The costs increase exponentially. Every single pound of something or kilo that you make is going to have an added cost. Labor, operation, inspections, transport, and so on and so forth. So the meat will inevitably become very, very expensive, which means that inevitably the quality of the meat must go down. And this is very important to me because as an Italian man, I'm quite keen on my food. You can't see me from the waist down, but I should let you know that I'm rather well-rounded, put it that way. And one of the reasons why that is because I really like to eat. My wife cooks really nice, so but what's very, very difficult is finding good ingredients as a general thing. And I'll get to my anecdote later. I don't want to steal my own thunder, so I'm going to let you continue for a moment, but I just wanted to touch on this regulation stuff. Whenever there's regulation to control essentially anything, it's always quoted or it's always proposed as a safety, as a helpful thing, and it inevitably and consistently ends up privileging whoever is already, quote, rich, and always hurts the poor, like all communism. All communism always destroys the poor to help the rich. That's the way it works. Make the rich richer and the poor poorer. It separates these two classes, going back to essentially a feudal machinery. That's what's happening with these laws. So, carry on.
all the costs are on a per volume basis. Not only that, the big food companies are powerful enough that they can lobby our politicians to change the regulations in their favor. So this actively suppresses competition coming from small farmers. They've rigged things in their favor using the government.
I don't disagree, but this is a natural eventuality, essentially. When the government becomes large enough, only people with sufficient influence can do it. That's why the concept of the Alinskyite protest exists. You're trying to force the government to do something. That's what unions are for, and so on and so forth. The problem is the government exists in that form where it controls absolutely everything, including people's liberty to do whatever they want, and that will inevitably help, like I said, the larger companies, who then of course will take advantage of it, and so it becomes a self-perpetuating cycle. It's what all lefties call capitalism, and the righties are too stupid to understand that when the lefties are complaining about capitalism, they have a point. The thing is, the lefties are too stupid to understand that capitalism is the inevitable evolution of communism, because communism is financially incomprehensible. So communism makes no sense on a financial level. Capitalism takes over. Capitalism turns into crapitalism or crony capitalism. It's inevitable. The problem is the ism. There is a power to be controlled. If that power was severely contained to the individual, the company, the group, the whatever, you would have completely different problems, which I'm not denying would exist. But what you wouldn't have is this stifling level of anti-competitive behavior. And this regulation that murders little things. So
this is why it costs more to buy bacon from a local farmer than the bacon at Walmart that comes from 1,000 miles away. Something is very wrong here.
Yes.
And it makes me particularly mad when it comes to bacon, because I love bacon, but I don't end up buying a lot of it, because the kind that I want, coming from farmers that raise their pigs humanely, that tends to be pretty expensive. And
I'll stop here. Okay, so Jomi, here's the issue. The kind that you want that is raised humanely, you're not going to explain the whole thing about how pigs are raised and so on and so forth. All valid stuff. But I shall tell you something else, which I have discovered I might have discovered precisely 2 years ago. See, precisely 2 years ago, I might or might not have helped somebody in their lives very much by helping them financially and giving them effectively a loan that has no interest, because I was keen to help them survive with their family. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this. Anyway, this individual and I have been friends for a while, and he's been very helpful to me. I suppose outside of what I've just said, I haven't been particularly helpful to him, but it is what it is. And he provides me with a couple of services. And once this has happened, he has made a vow. He might have made a vow. All of this is purely hypothetical. He might have made a vow, and he might have made a vow to provide me with approximately 150 kilograms worth of pork meat for the rest of my life, so long as, of course, I am at a reasonable physical distance from him. Now, that may change in the future, but we shall see. Point is, I might have been receiving pork meat from this individual. I keep on making mistakes like that. I might have been receiving pork meat from this individual for free for the past 2 years. Okay? And the first year, I might or might not have received meat that was so flipping delicious that I have never seen human beings lick the front of their teeth the way cats do after having eaten something they rather enjoy. So this movement over here, or the bottom of your teeth, this pork meat. Okay, now this pork meat might or might have not have come from pigs that he might or might not have, that he might be keeping completely legally, because where we live, it is illegal to have pigs at home. So he lives on a small farm, or might live on a small farm, and he has a bunch of animals. Lots of them are legal. For example, anything that flies or attempts to fly is legal. Chickens are legal, ducks are legal. I know he has chickens, I know he has ducks, etc. But he might or might not have, or at the time have had, pigs that he raised himself, that he washed himself. He might have had 2 or something like that. And he was saying, yeah, mine, they go freely around, they love to eat, they love to do all sorts of stuff. For the purposes of the rest of the video, I'm going to talk as if this was real, but of course it might or might not be for legal purposes. Okay, good. So it's all purely hypothetical there. So anyway, and yeah, so he gave me part of this meat 2 years ago, and it was so incredibly different than all of the meat you could purchase. It had a different color, it had a different smell, and it had a different taste. And the taste was incredible. It was like being hit by a wave of flavor. Very, very, very different than the awful pork meat that one can buy at any generic store. Okay? That's all pre-packaged in plastic. The one that I may have received was in a bucket carried in a random car. Also totally illegal. Right? So that has really changed my perspective on this thing. I mean, not changed, it's just educated me more. I already was of the perspective that all of this regulation is just impeding comfort. But what it's also changing is it's changing the quality of food dramatically due to costs, as Jomi said, but also due to the unwillingness to get involved with any of this stuff when this level of discomfort happens. Right? You need this rule, you need this insurance, you need this, etc. Now, my friend might or might not have moved to somewhere still nearby, but to somewhere else where at the moment he has no capability of having pork. So in order to not to break his vow, he has provided me with meat that came from other sources. And the meat that came from these other sources was still better than the one you buy, but dramatically worse than the original that I had received. Dramatically. Okay, the difference is stark. So, everybody ought to know and understand that all of these regulations are actively ruining your life. One reason why this is because the cost increase. The second reason why this is because if you want to be a farmer, or you know anybody who wants to be a farmer, they can't. One reason why this is because all of the power and wealth is concentrated into the hands of the very few. One of the reasons, so hare capitalism, one of the reasons why this is because the flavor is collapsing. Now, when you have the fortune, I suppose, of being as old as I am, and having been on this earth for about 40 years, I was on this earth in a place where the supermarket still didn't exist as a concept when I was little. It was just starting. It just became a thing. And the supermarket has lots of advantages. It's very convenient and so on and so forth. I use the supermarket all the time, like everybody else. However, nothing says that the supermarket needs to be the way it is outside the regulations. That's why there's the brands, and the brands are all always the same, and so on and so forth. This entire thing is absolutely ruining everybody's life. And everything you want to do is illegal. The only way to exit this machinery is to be illegal, or to be as off-grid as possible. And do everything yourself, which is really difficult because suddenly you need to learn skills you don't necessarily have. You need to live very, very differently. And it's very difficult to live that way because you're taxed no matter what. Like in sense, for example, if you, let's say, have a bunch of chickens, you decide to become a chicken farmer for yourself, right? So you have, I don't know, 30, 40 chickens, and then you slaughter them, etc., etc. All perfectly legal, all perfectly fine, at least where I live. The problem is that's a full-time job. I mean, chickens are relatively easy; they manage themselves in large part. But you need to protect the property, fence things. You need to separate your vegetables from your chickens. They absolutely adore going to destroy your crops, at least in my case, and so on. So all of a sudden you can't have a proper normal job, so you can't make money, you can't pay income tax, but you still pay VAT, you still pay property tax, you still pay taxes on your vehicle. It just drains you. Okay, so that's not, because you're removing yourself from the profit system, right? Meaning you're living, you're not interested in the money if you do it that way. But even that's not possible. I am living proof that this is the case. We're bleeding consistently. So, and of course the bills and da. Anyway, I'll conclude this here, but the point is, everything you will want to eat, proper veggies and so on, the ones you grow, for example, will taste very, very different than the ones you buy. And stuff like this, you can do it, but it's extremely difficult, and essentially all of it totally illegal everywhere. So yeah, everything you want to do is illegal. How sad. Goodbye.